Dalian, thank you so much. I think you did try your best to save some time. I'll also do the same. I've only got two gentlemen here. Jonathan, welcome, and Sherwin from MTN. But I'm going to give you 1 minute just to obviously introduce yourself properly and what you're responsible for to the audience. Working. Let's see.
Testing.
Hi, yeah,
good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sherwin Barlow, and I'm with MTN, and I head up the enterprise engagement service portfolio. And most of the time, people ask me, what does that actually mean? Simply means that we really focus on enabling large enterprises like the banks to communicate and engage with their customers more efficiently and effectively. Thanks.
Thanks, Sherwin.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. So my name is Jonathan Lamb. I'm at Standard Bank, specifically within the CIB side of the bank, so corporate investment banking side. And I'm part of, I used to say a new team, but we're about 4 years old now, so it's not really new, called CIB Digital, to really focus on, our purpose is to really focus on shifting the dial when it comes to engaging with big corporates in relation to the bank services and non-traditional products.
Cool, thank you, gents. So the conversation we're going to have today is around delivering the world-class customer experience in digital banking. And I think the first question I'm going to throw at you, Jonathan, and ask, looking at the different challenges that the banking sector is experiencing, is it even possible to achieve world-class customer experience? And what does that look like?
So I think, you know, my experience sits in the big business to big business world. So I'll focus on that piece of the puzzle. I think, is it possible? It needs to happen. Absolutely, it needs to happen. So we need to make it possible.
Okay.
It relies on us actually listening to our customers. And if you look at the last sort of 5 years, there's been some clear shifts in how big business are looking to engage with their banks. One of them is around consolidation. So any big business operating on the continent that's grown up across multiple countries with multiple product sets has ended up with many digital solutions. And so does consolidation, you know, how do you achieve that? You need to come up with a way of showing up in a uniform manner. And that's not giving your customers 20 username and passwords to log into 20 different solutions. So you need to think about what that should look like and listen to your clients. I mean, the individuals that work for your clients happen to have to engage with you because the company they work for banks with us. You need to put yourselves into their shoes and really think about what consolidation looks like. The second big theme is then there's new personas emerging that we need to service. It's not just the traditional CFO, treasury team that we've historically engaged with. And one of those new personas is the developer. Our clients employ an incredible number of technologists. And so we need to think about how do we show up for them? And the word API, Pearl took us through and been discussed many times today. That's where we need to be going. And that talks to the real-time expectation, but you know, keeping the technologists within your client base happy is now as important as keeping the CFO happy.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it is something that we have to make possible, but we're not there. We've got the infrastructures and we've got, you know, tools at our disposal, but we haven't gotten it right yet. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, and I think it's a journey. So again, much like previous discussion around how to approach putting an entire bank into the cloud, you've got to start somewhere. You've got to start somewhere. You need to test your theories out in the market. We're not done. I mean, I'd argue, are we ever done when it comes to keeping clients happy, especially with digital innovation? But you've got to start, and you've got to have a way, you've got to have a strategy you're working towards, but also flexibility for this thing to change.
Okay.
Because it's new.
Thanks, Jonathan. Sherwin, I'm going to bring you in here because obviously experience is different for different clients. And Jonathan is saying, speaking to around listening to our clients. What I want to pose to you is we are obviously going mobile first or mobile only, right? So what is MTN doing to assist banks to engage better with their customers?
No, thanks for the question. I think MTN, or let me say telcos, have actually come a long way.
Yeah.
You know, I think we have actually managed to pivot a lot. You know, the philosophy just in my portfolio is how do we actually enable our enterprise clients like the banks to just focus on doing what they do very well. And in this scenario, it's almost like you focus on the UX as a bank, focus and ensure that your application's user experience within the app is as good as it can be, and that you build out all the services that's required for the client to transact with. In the past, we were actually only focused on being the pipe, and which means that we just enabled the connectivity. But over the last couple of years, we've actually invested a lot into actually understanding your end customer, because we realize that we actually play quite a pivotal role to ensure that the experience the user has on the mobile device is actually great. And we've discovered that obviously understanding what the future firstly looks like, I think, and that's why I have some of my notes, was just to remember the people's names. What Chipo said was obviously the experience needs to be frictionless for the end user. We need to start focusing on the preferences that the user has, because the client that we're now serving is quite complex. And what we need to just keep in mind is that we are in Africa. And this is where MTN basically comes into play and how we've actually pivoted, because I would want to say we've actually moved up the stack, because now we have invested in our networks right across Africa, which that speaks to one of the barriers to ensure that the user has a very sleek experience, because you can develop the best app in the world, but if you don't have internet connectivity where you are, the user would not be able to achieve what they need to achieve. The second part that we've actually done was we obviously ensure that we get the cheapest smartphone devices to customers where required. Then what we also have done is to give some, I would want to say, comfort to the end user, is invest in our network security, because that's also another barrier and what the future is about. Everyone's concerned about the trusting of mobile applications and especially banking within the digital environment.
Yeah.
And then we've actually invested a lot, and specifically in the portfolio that I look after, to service the complex client. And what I mean by that is to service the guy that wants to be communicated on a specific channel. He's starting to choose the channel that he wants to be communicated or he wants to transact with you on. He's starting to say, don't contact me between this time and this time. Please speak to me at that time. If you're sending me a notification, don't send it to me via SMS, send it to me over email. You get guys just choosing the preferences that they require. And what we've actually done is we've implemented a full omni-channel communication platform. What that means is that banks today, they connect to us via API and they deliver the last mile message to the end customer. And we then keep track through a customer data platform on what the preference is, what times the guy wants you to talk to him, which native application the guy has on his phone, and also the channel of preference. Do you send him a message via an SMS? Do you send him a message via a WhatsApp bot? Do you send him a message via email? You know, and also just ensuring that we don't leave anyone behind, because we keep our legacy channels in place, which is like the SMS and USSD, but also invested heavily in in the bots and in the AI and wherever the tradition is actually going at the moment. So
Yeah.
we've built out quite a lot. So supporting the banks at let me say, at the lower network layer to ensure that everything's secure, that the road is ready and
Yeah.
good to go, and that it's accessible for everyone. And then also now starting to plug in that application layer where we get you just to focus on your core banking, and we then deliver the message downstream to the customer. And if it's for transactions or marketing or whatever you need to do,
Yeah.
we take care of all of that. Yeah.
Thanks, Sherwin. Jonathan, I'm seeing you nodding. Do you want to add on that?
No, I mean, the perspective Sherwin's coming in from is that end user. And, the words frictionless, simplicity, intuitive are key to that. We're now, in a world where we don't tolerate complicated things anymore. So as consumers, we expect from the businesses we buy product from a level of intuitiveness. They need to know me.
Yeah.
The word personalization gets thrown in there, and so it resonates. I mean, the B2B link is a different discussion, but at the end of the day, you're servicing a consumer at the end of every digital solution.
Correct. Yeah. So Sherwin, just to go back to what you've said, I mean, security and trust was obviously a big part of our discussion today. I think every speaker kind of spoke to that, which is the biggest worry for our customers. But secondly, I think the other takeaway is around building one customer view where you know what products to sell to Penny at what time, through which channel, and therefore it makes Penny feel like my bank actually understands me. Am I right in summarizing it that way? Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to do it a little bit different, though. I do want to engage the crowd during the conversation, not at the end. So if there are any questions before I go, we can take a few questions, and then I'll come back to my questions that I want to continue asking. Any takers at the moment? We can hear you.
Thank you for the opportunity. So I just wanted to check with your hyper-personalization that you're doing now, right? You're obviously using atomic data.
Yep.
So could you maybe just drill down a little bit more in detail on how, especially on that last mile, because obviously now you've got an aggregator, which is going to be, say, the bank. You come in as the last mile partner. How are you actually consuming that atomic data to give that client that personalized experience you're talking about?
Yeah. So the big trick is our CDP platform. So it's the customer data platform. So obviously, a lot of enterprises have not embarked on the journey to collect the specific data that a CDP requires, which means I'm tracking to see who Sherwin is. At the moment, you know who Sherwin is, what products he has with you, and what his mobile number is. So in a nutshell, we're just growing that database to say that, okay, so now Sherwin has an Android device. He has a S23 Plus. He says that he doesn't like SMSs, send him an email. He says, don't contact me or send me notifications between 8 and 12 at night or 8 and 7 the next morning. Only send it to me after 7 a.m. in the morning. So now we firstly assist on embarking on that journey to collect that type of information so that we almost fill the customer data platform with preferences. So when an enterprise like a bank comes and says, hey, Sherwin withdrew 1,000 rand, and I need to send him a message to tell him that he's withdrawn this 1,000 rand. We then check against the customer data platform that we've built to say that, hey, okay, Sherwin, this is who he is, this is the phone he has. We can either change the message and make it look very nice, like a smart SMS with a picture, etc., because we know that he has a very good Android phone. And we then know that his preference is to receive that message via an email or via WhatsApp in that instance. And we then tailor or cater the communication personalized to what he requires. Where a different customer would be, hey, he doesn't have a smartphone, let's send him the standard traditional SMS. But what we do is we just get the bank to focus to say that this is the guy, I need to deliver a message to him. If it's not what we call a priority message, which means it's an OTP, which obviously the bank would then control the structure and format, which that comes through to the end user. If it's not I would want to say priority one message, and it's something that the user can choose, we then enable that communication downstream. So we have a platform that enables the message to get to the user in multiple different formats. Yeah.
Happy? Okay, so I'll go back to one of my questions. And Jonathan, I know you operate mostly in the B2B space, but let's talk about the battle of customers, right? What can the banks learn from fintech?
Look, I think, it's no secret that fintechs have been able to plug holes that banks would never be able to. It's well understood. It's been going on for years. So we do a lot of engagement, a lot of investments, and a lot of partnership with fintechs for the purposes of complementing our traditional products so that we can offer more to our clients.
Yeah.
And when you engage with these, essentially the entrepreneurs, founders, etc., it doesn't really matter how big the fintech is or even into the big tech world. A couple of things, strike me every time is nothing is unsolvable in their minds. There's no problem that isn't solvable, no matter how big it is, how close it is to the regulatory environment. And that's a mindset of people who don't work or haven't always worked in big corporate, right? The second thing is then, resilience and persistence. Making sure that you can continually chip away at your vision in small chunks. And those two things we can definitely learn from fintechs. It's an alternative way of thinking, but not just in a workshop for a day, constantly forever. It's like a different mindset. And that's the biggest thing that always strikes me when you engage with these almost entrepreneurial founders of fintechs.
Yeah. So earlier on, I think there was a panel discussion around leadership and the digital transformation and the culture. How does culture fit into providing this world-class customer experience in digital banking?
And it's a great question. I mean, you need to provide an environment. So firstly, you need to decide, are you in as it results, if you're in to help lead or, obviously Absa lead, we heard from the previous panelists.
Of course. I
to follow
I didn't
quickly,
want to rub salt into the wound.
It was clearly, But to follow quickly.
You're both my customers, so I can't choose sides.
And Sherwin, you best to know, where your bread is buttered.
So to follow quickly, or to enter into this world where you take the bold enough step to say you want to show up digitally to your clients, whether you're dealing with big business, SMEs or individuals, the message needs to be baked into the group's strategy. It's not something that can happen in a single team somewhere in a particular business unit. There needs to be a direction set at a fairly high level within the bank. And then there needs to be a world where you almost in parallel have a massive focus on digitizing your existing traditional businesses, where you are continuing to, and it's still innovation, it doesn't mean it's not innovation, but make sure that your existing businesses that you've always been good at, that are your bread and butter, continue to be invested in and innovate. And then you need to create an environment where there's a team of individuals, put some resource behind a team of people that can do things almost within the bank that are non-traditional. And that word's quite broad.
Correct, yes.
But that team or the resource behind it need to know that they're going to try 10 things and one might work, and that's fine. And that's a very difficult thing for a big traditional business,
Correct.
whether it's a bank or a telco or a retailer, it doesn't matter. But there's enough evidence and there's enough innovation that's come out of big corporates to show that if you do that and you create the right environment and hence culture in that team, that you can create some magic.
Let's go back to the crowd. I see you've got a mic already. Let's go.
Thanks. Sam from FNB Lesotho. And my question is actually going to Sherwin. And particularly because I've had a challenge in the Lesotho perspective with regards to the versions of the mobile phones. You know, how are you handling that? Because I, for one, for instance, our banking app, there are some versions that it wouldn't run. It needs you to be on a certain version. Some of these devices cannot accommodate a certain version of the OS already. You know, how are you dealing with the whole thing? Because some people think that if I have a smartphone, then I'll be able to use all the apps that I want. But now they come to mine, for instance, and then I'm like, no, but it won't run on that version of Android, and their phone cannot take a higher version than that. How's that impacting your business?
No, so I think that's a good question, and that's another way in which we're actually enabling you guys to just focus on what you do. And you saw from Paul's presentation with regards to where we're moving with our APIs. And from a network perspective, we actually have a lot of information about a user's device. And very, very slowly, so in the past, we actually just used to facilitate, or still do facilitate and assist banks, for example, to check SIM swaps, when last the SIM swap was done before you send someone an OTP. And what we're actually doing now is we taking the information that we have and we're actually sharing what we can with our enterprises, but sharing it for the correct reasons. For example, in this scenario, it's to say that, hey, this guy has this device, you can't send him this message. You know, we actually chatted to one of the banks, and one of the CIOs actually asked, hey, no one can give him a solution where he says that I only want to send a specific message to only iPhone 13 users. You know, no one could give him that solution, and that's where we actually assisted him, because we have a lot of that information on our network, because there's obviously headers and things that we get from requests that we receive from the device, and we utilize that within the platform that we've built. So for example, I think even we care about we do all the language translations for you. Yeah, it's very, very broad. You literally give us the message. If the guy's preference was to receive it in a different language, we ensure that the language changes when the message gets delivered to the end user. So it's like I say, you formulate the message, you pass it to us, and we take care of the rest. Yeah. So it's through the APIs, and we have all of that information on our network based on the device obviously requesting certain things from the network. Yeah.
All good.
Just
There's another question.
yeah.
Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry, I'm not going to hog the time here. I suppose the question is directed to Jonathan and yourself, Penny. Within the context of Africa, a business is defined differently based on geographical nuances. So you'd find that in some countries, an SME is just an agent on the street. And that agent is very important in your value chain to providing a service to your customer. And there are challenges around ensuring that that agent is registered on your books according to the regulation. But we often see that we tend to use regulation-based and even technology-based on what we know. And what do we know is South Africa. How are you approaching that challenge where an ATM or an agent has become your ATM now, and you need to understand their operations, and you need to ensure that how you provide digital platforms also speak to agents instead of an ATM or a branch, for example?
Jonathan, do you want to take that?
Yeah, look, I mean, and it's incredibly important. And, you know, the example you've used is perfect because that almost agent or, you know, vendor that's created themselves as part of the ecosystem, a large part of that came out of the mobile money wave, you know, that swept through East and West Africa long before, you know, we really were using it. The only real way is to empathize. You've got to go and put time in and understand what do these small businesses do, where do they fit into the ecosystem. You can't do it from here. You can't sit in an office here or even go out into the environment here and pretend that you're going to solve something for Kenya. So you must empathize and spend time understanding the problems on the ground, and that's hard and expensive. But if you want to get something right that people use, you need to spend that time. There's, you know, I mean, we're fortunate in our business to have presence in most of these markets, so we can, you know, leverage off our local teams who live and use a lot of these services every day. If you don't have that, then you need to spend the time understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. I must also agree. I think from an Absa perspective, it's we do the thing, we address or we deal with different scenarios differently, and you know, being based in South Africa, and chatting to my colleagues in the rest of Africa, there's just different ways that they do things, and I think, you know, from an ATM, you mentioned an ATM, which is a big part of my job, you know, managing ATMs across the country. And the conversations I'm having with my other colleagues within the aerospace are very different. Even the device types that we're using, you know, we are far ahead. And I've turned an ATM into a self-service device, which is an entire bank, where, you know, they're starting to leverage off how I'm building the stuff, even from a technology perspective. You know, like Dylan was saying, that we are finding some sort of synergies, but we do have to address some of the situations very, very differently. Because even, you know, when I used to manage collections, the way in which we collected in South Africa was very different how, you know, we collected in Kenya, because, you know, they didn't, with their infrastructure wasn't there, they were collecting via cell phones. I had an entire call center which had the, you know, top of the line technology to be able to collect. And that speaks to what Sherwin was saying earlier on around, I knew what time to collect from which clients, because, you know, because I understand the type of jobs they do. So it's going to take us a long time to get to sort of align, but I almost don't think we want to align, because the demographics are not the same. Yeah, but we can certainly leverage off each other. I mean, I'm learning quite a few things, but they're also learning quite a lot from me as well in terms of their ATMs. But also the number of ATMs they have is probably 20% of what the numbers I have in South Africa. So it's a long journey. All right, cool. Gatekeeper, how far are we doing? Where are you? I don't see you. Okay, no, the fact that I don't see him in front of me, it means we can get, no, go away. We've got one more question here. I saw you raise your hand, am I correct? Are you okay? All right, cool. So, gents, let's talk about, so one of the speakers earlier, Chipo, I thoroughly enjoyed her talk. And she spoke about a key role that national vision plays, which there's a high reliance on, you know, government and other industry bodies, you know, for us to align certain things and achieve, you know, this world-class customer experience. Because I think digital transformation for me is about solving for a customer. So if the experience is not great, then we actually are not solving anything. In your opinion, you know, what do you think as the private sector, how would we contribute? Because she sounded like she doesn't think it's something that's possible to do, and maybe it's not. But I certainly think that it does contribute to the inability for us to get to the world class. So I just want to hear your opinion. You know, we don't have solutions, but I think this is the one thing that I took off in you know, when she was talking, to say, how do we drive ourselves and align as, firstly as industry bodies, and then at a national level?
Yeah, I can go first. I think I've actually worked quite extensively with SABRIC and okay, there's on the panel is obviously a lot of the banks and some of the telcos, because we were actually trying to fight a very big problem in SA, which is obviously mobile fraud. And we've discovered, and it's actually still a big thing in the industry, when someone's phone gets stolen, they phone us first. And where the trouble actually is, it's the banking app on the phone. You know, so we were working on a couple of analogies to ensure that the end user becomes a bit more educated when there is issues with regards to phone getting stolen, etc., SIM swap fraud, because we can only block the SIM and you might just not receive the OTP, but if you haven't called your bank first to lock your banking profile, we all actually know what would happen after that. So I think we shouldn't actually really wait for the government. I think we can still implement a very good world-class customer experience. I think there is regulatory frameworks, etc., that governs how we communicate to customers and when we can communicate to them. Just in our space, we obviously take into account that you can't send a marketing message after a certain time at night. You know, so if a bank gives us a marketing message to deliver, we pause that for tomorrow morning, you know. So there is frameworks that the government utilizes to control certain things. But what's important to understand is that we are in Africa. And I know that we want to build for the future, and I think one of the panelists, I think it was Sam, that said that they're not leaving anyone behind. But in essence, where we come from, we've taken a lot of interest in understanding the end customer. And that barriers that I spoke about earlier is very, very important. Because the framework that we've built out is actually built on something what we call reverse billing. And the reason I call it reverse billing and very specific to Africa is because a big barrier is actually the cost to engage. So customer says that banks are closing branches. Why should I pay for the data when I want to log on to the banking app? Yes, all the banks in South Africa is with us on reverse billing. But what we've done is with our omni-channel platform, we've actually...
I'm laughing because I actually managed a messaging platform and that reverse billing.
Yes.
I was there.
Yeah. No, so it's probably
Was
with
MTN's
us.
pricing good?
I'm not going to go there.
Nice. Yeah, so I can't comment. I'm under NDA
Let's
with
move
both
on,
of
guys.
you. So, yeah, so I was just saying, so yeah, no, we actually understand the Africa customer, I want to call it. Yeah. And I keep going back to the platform because we've taken into account that barrier of cost. We've taken into account the barrier of the devices. Not all of your customers has the best smartphone devices, right? The big problem that we've seen over the last couple of years is space on the device. They would rather keep the video of their family function over the weekend than download your banking app.
Correct.
You know, and all the banks, and not just banks, but all enterprises are saying, hey, I want to develop the best app and super app and blah, blah, blah. But customers, you guys know the percentage of utilization versus your customer base, right? And the adoption. So we look at all of those elements. All of this that I'm talking about, it's built on the analogy that it doesn't cost the end customer anything. You know, so we we take care of all of those things because we really understand the end customer. And I think it's it's just sitting together, working together, and seeing how we can assist as telcos to facilitate you guys to deliver that end-to-end great customer experience. So I think it's possible, because I don't think the government's going to do anything but issue regulations and ask telcos to give it for free. Where I think,
look, I'm just glad that you think it's possible.
No, I think it's
I find
very
a level
possible,
of comfort. Jonathan, I just want to bring you in as well into the same question. What were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so look, I mean, when it comes to government and private and how we both ensure that this environment we operate in, and I'm talking about the continent, not just South Africa, you know, we all fit into a set of regulations which are different across the different markets. And the key things that impact the ability to digitize and innovate revolve around things like cloud, data privacy, POPI,
correct,
and what constitutes identity. And, you know, an enabling environment where a regulator or a government is progressive in their thinking has been proven in other parts of the world, like in India and in China, where an enabling environment has almost created the ability for the private sector to leapfrog, because there's a set of commoditized capabilities that people don't have to rebuild. And so how can we work together? You know, the private sector need to work with the respective regulators in every country where we operate to influence and encourage and understand, you know, if a regulation says X, what's the theory behind it? And so I wouldn't say that it can't be done. It's happened elsewhere in the world. I think that it would be great if, you know, we had a level of consistency across markets. It would be a lot cheaper to innovate as a private sector, especially big multinationals that are in multiple markets. But that's unlikely to happen, and it doesn't happen anywhere in the world. So I think we need to work with the regulators to almost create a level of consistency, and where it's possible, create things like a centralized digital identity. I mean, that as a base functionality would significantly help all of us. Just think about how many times you send around your ID and your address details to a big corporate every year.
Absolutely, I'm on that page in terms of the digital identity. I mean, that would unlock quite a big impediment that we currently have. All right, so I've got one last question, but I do want to go to the crowd. I see the gatekeepers there. Just one question from crowd, and then I'll have mine, and then we can close off, gentlemen.
Okay, back on again. Sorry, me again, Chris.
No problem.
So I've got a two-pronged question split out. So first one to you, Sherwin. I'm just having a look at, if we're looking at transformation and the movement of, you know, the entire technology environment forward on telcos, what is the position that the current MNOs have on the USSD framework and platforms, specifically USSD NI, that kind of stuff? We know that a lot of third parties use it as an authentication base, but we also, there's rumors that eventually it's going to start becoming unsupported. So a little bit of guidance there would be great. And then on your side, Jonathan, looking at the CIB, our experiences to transform the CIB landscape into a digital world is obviously a lot harder than consumer and a retail base. Would be very keen to know if you guys have picked up any swim lanes or tricks as you've been going through your builds and your journeys on how we've moved from that pencil and paper environment and actually got a very highly regulated and an environment that does not have a lot of trust in self-service type of technology to actually start onboarding with those lines. Thank you.
I think you can go first. Yours sounds very complicated.
I was thinking the exact same
Let's
about
give it to him.
Look, I think digitizing a B2B experience has inherent differences to a B2C. Think of some of the things like when you're dealing with a big corporate, it's not an individual making a decision to adopt. It's a business. And when you embed something into a business, especially if it's technology linked, it's very difficult to get it out. So the cost and the thought that goes into it needs to be carefully considered. That's the first sort of big challenge. And then the individuals who actually use the capability that gets embedded is often very different to the people that make the decision. So you can't solution it around the stakeholder that you're trying to convince to take your solution. You need to obviously manage that, but then solution around the end user. There's no tips or tricks other than, have multiple. I mean, what we've done is taken the view, as I said earlier, continue to significantly invest in existing traditional products. So have the best digital payment capability and be at the forefront of account management and simplify things like account opening and annual KYC. So that is our bread and butter. We must continue to heavily invest in that. But at the same time, enable a team to do things like non-traditional on-selling of, identity management or KYC capability to big corporates who have got a similar problem. It's hard work. It's not easy. Showing up as a bank, trying to move into the non-traditional takes time. But my view, entities, incumbents, big established incumbents like telcos, banks, have got a good opportunity to properly solve for more than just their traditional capability across their clients. But there's no secret sauce I can give you, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. With regards to USSD, I think for the African market, it's still very, very, very prevalent. And I think you mentioned just one use case where USSD is now being applied to actually do authentication, because network initiated or NI USSD, as you said, it's the reason it's so liked by enterprises, because it's a very, very virtual private link that you actually establish to the user device. But there's a couple of downfalls with NI USSD because it's obviously flash, right? If the guy's phone is face down and he doesn't see the NI coming through, or he doesn't have his device ready in his hand, the flash message actually disappears after a while. So it's literally just to sit down and think of the application areas. Yes, networks doesn't actually like it because it's very, very heavy on the network, because we actually close a channel and dedicate it to that initiated message to get to the end device. Hence, they don't really like it. But I think there is space for it in a couple of use cases, like authentication. And it's for you to see what you actually want to implement on USSD. We're the only telco or the only operator that has made it very, very easy, or actually the first in the country where we have a USSD builder. So gone are the days where you need to be able to code. You can drag and drop a very, very quick USSD menu, and it's deployed across all of the networks in South Africa. Yes, by the way, that's also what we do. All of the solutions that we have, it's not just for empty and SIM cards. We do it across all the different networks in South Africa. So you build your menu, and it's literally, I think, look at the use case and the problem that you want to solve, and for the customer that you want to serve. I think USSD is still very utilized in a specific space, and it's a very, very powerful tool to do complex, I would want to say, activities. I mean, the banks have used it successfully for many, many years to trigger very, very complex transactions with a very, very simple USSD menu. So it's looking at your use cases and just playing very careful and having alternative failovers, because if he doesn't get the NI message, what do you then utilize as a failover to deliver the same message to him?
Yeah. So gents, I think I'll give my last question to you, Jonathan. You're the chosen one, and I think it's an extension of what he asked. So with customers wanting different things, and as any business, you continuously, you said earlier on, we need to listen to our customers, and their needs keep changing, right? So how is the customer acquisition strategies changing in 2023 and even beyond that? Because the demands are different now. We've got to respond. So even in the way that we acquire these customers. So how are those changing?
So customers, as much as their needs are changing continuously, they're also spoiled for choice.
Okay.
And if you combine fintech with big tech, with banks, telcos, etc., there's an almost overwhelming number of digital solutions that are available. Right? What's important is to pick a strategy as an existing provider into big business, so like ourselves as banks. And if you've got a strategy to go beyond your traditional, in addition to your traditional, then the view we've taken is, if we can get that right, then we've created an environment where, it's similar to what Chinosis's methodology is that Bill went through earlier. And it's maybe an overused word sometimes, but the marketplace concept where, banks trade off trust. And we've got established client relationships as a result of having had a banking relationship with them for many years. And so can we use that relationship to see whether we can broaden what we offer? And again, that's not new. It's what Amazon did. They started selling books and now sell everything. So customer acquisition for us is as much about brand new customers as it is about broadening how we can help our existing customer base.
Yeah.
And that new persona that I talked about earlier, the developer persona, and if you take that all the way up to the exco of a company, that's the CDO or the head of innovation or the CIO, which is not a stakeholder we've traditionally engaged as bankers. And so customer acquisition needs to be seen new parts within existing businesses as much as it is new businesses.
Cool. Well, I just want to do it a little bit differently. Does anyone else in the room would like to answer that question instead of asking a question? No answers? Dololo. Okay. Gents, I think it's been a great and insightful conversation. In general, I've thoroughly enjoyed today. I think all the speakers were great. I definitely took a few insights from all the speakers. I'm also thankful for the opportunity to facilitate this discussion. I've been in the banking space for a long time, but it's amazing how you continuously learn. So I'm really, really grateful and thank you. I think we can close off if there are no other questions. Happy? Good.